I start with this picture, and before I get into everything else, I want to say a few words about this picture, which I feel has a lot of meaning. This is the outside of a Syrian family house in one of the villages. As you can see, there's no windows. There's plastic covering a hole in the door where glass should be. There's buckets on the ground at the doorstep for water because they have no water. There's a tray to the right of those buckets, which is for a pit toilet, which they need desperately. This is typical, but in all of these challenges, etc., there's an enormous amount of resilience, and the heart painted on the wall is a public display of this. And I just like this picture, and I think it sets a theme for the rest of what I generally talk about. So now it won't move forward. Guys, okay, so sorry about this. So the tribe projects, I'll give you some background into what we do and how it started, but I always start off with this question, which is a question I asked myself when I was thinking about how and where I would get involved, which is Turkey. And just briefly by background, I'm a chartered accountant, and I spent a good amount of years working in an investment bank in London as a COO, which is someone who solves problems, implements the strategy, and basically gets shit done across many different functions. And I was there, and I was following the civil war in Syria and listening to economists talk about the need for more infrastructure, more schools, teachers, all the opportunities that would arise with the mass migration of people that we were starting to see. And this really interested me, and I wanted to put my skills to work doing something that personally mattered. Why? Because it's the biggest humanitarian crisis we've seen in recent history. Because I felt that we have a social responsibility to do something, and because I feel we should use our privilege to be a part of the solution. And as I've said, and you've heard before, because I could, so I did. There's over 26 million people in the world that are refugees today, and the largest source is from Syria. If you don't know, Syria had a population before the war of about 20 million, and after 9 years of war, half the population's lives have been upturned. 6 million have fled Syria, and nearly 4 million to Turkey, as it's a bordering country. And today, it's really hard to get your head around the numbers when we're talking in millions, but Turkey's population is about the same as Germany's. And today, 1 in 20 people living in Turkey are refugees, half of whom are kids. And it's important to note these things as we consider the macro issues. Where do Syrians live in Turkey? Well, it's a misconception in the past that most live in government-run camps. In fact, less than 10% were being accommodated in camps, and they were close to the Syrian border. The majority of Syrians live in urban areas. For example, there's over 1 million in Istanbul, and this has created an overwhelming pressure for communities. This picture, it's the base of Basmani in Izmir, which is where we're based, and it's looking up the hill towards Alexander the Great's castle at the top. I love this area of Izmir. It's slapped together housing, it seems, that has worked for a very long time for its residents. Many are being pulled down to make way for hotels, but there's also a regeneration project taking place. Perhaps Melton talked about this. This part of Izmir has a wonderful history, and it's very well documented. I spent a lot of time wandering around these streets up the hills, meeting families, visiting people in their homes, seeing kids playing in the streets, kicking balls. It once used to be quite a dangerous area. I think in Wikipedia it was described as a slum. But since the influx of people into Kurdish people, Turkish Kurdish people in the past, and recently Syrian people, it it sort of perhaps in a way gentrified the area. It's not moving to the next slide, but I'll just describe Izmir. Here we go, Izmir at a glance. So the population of the whole region is about 4 million. And I love this picture because it sort of shows a lot going on. So in the bottom left-hand corner, there's the old ancient ruins. And then over the street are the mismatch of housing that leads down the hill to the hustle and bustle of the newly organized and well-planned modern part of the city. It's slow, sorry. Okay, it's at this point I'll stop with the headlines, as I say here, because we're working with people, and people are more than a statistic. It's important to remember before being labelled as refugees. They were people like you and me. They had lives like you and me. They were students. This is a friend, Noor, who was in her final year of law in Damascus, and there was a bomb. She saw her friends fly through the air, and she woke up in hospital and suffered a something to her nervous system, and she has been left in a wheelchair. But she has since moved to Canada, where she's getting her treatment. That was her dream. We've met artists. We know plenty of tradesmen who are really skilled, electricians, builders in concrete, specialised metal workers, specialised stone workers. We've met teachers. This is a small school project we had going. You know, we really see that people are valuable and needed. Because by meeting with people, you start to see beyond the headlines, and you see humans. We are all human. This is Noor and her mother, who are now living in Canada. But the question I want to ask also is, have we become desensitized? Have most people moved on from the news of what's been happening on Lesbos, for example, in the last week? When I go back to, this is a picture I took when I went back to London, and I was just, I don't know, I was just in shock that I sort of felt that today's news is already trash. It's impossible to know really what's going on and what people have been through. So people's journeys getting to Turkey have been rough. We often think of people arriving to islands in Greece, but the journey starts well before there. We know this is a family I met who, the guy on the right, he's 80 years old, and they slept rough under trees, under bridges for a month before they got to Izmir to be with their family. And this guy, he just reminded me of my father, who's also 80, and he's in a time of his life, the golden years, when he should be relaxed and enjoying time with his grandchildren. And he held out his hand and showed me a wad of money and said, "This is all I have left." It just sort of made me feel really sad. And I'm still in touch with this family. I met them in the very first year I was there. They live in Basmani, and his son on the left of him, he collects cardboard for income as rubbish to recycle. Bear with me. There's constant fear. People are trying to get out of Turkey to Greece. We see these life jackets for sale that aren't even really, they're not necessarily standard life jackets. They're full of foam. We know, we've seen this on the other side in Greece. And meanwhile, smugglers sit there and discuss profits with a total disregard to people's lives. There's an overarching feeling of loss, and there's a longing to go back home. there's lost dignity, and there's an enormous amount of psychological trauma. Injustice, too many stories of what people have experienced in jail, for example. It's horrendous. And the inhumanity of it all, really. I heard a story, I met a family who had just arrived, and they were caught at the border, and so were other people, and they saw a man get beaten to the ground in front of his wife, and this is the border patrol at the border of Turkey, Syria and Turkey, and while he was on the ground, the guards threw biscuits on his face and set their dogs onto him. It's disgusting. So really ask yourself, what if it happened to me? What if all your lifelong belongings were now here or here? And I've talked about this before. That's exactly how what I thought when I stepped into this tent, and what the people said to me who lived here, that this is all they now had. It just sort of broke my heart. I didn't know what to think. What if your future was lost? So on the left is my translator, who many of you met last year, Zach, when you came across, and we also went to Ephesus. And on the right is his sister. This is a group of siblings, 6 of them. And actually shortly after the summer course last year, these guys got the opportunity to move to Canada. And so they've now been there for a bit over a year and settling in really well. All 6 of them managed to go. And the girl on the right, she was a first-year architect student. Zach, he was studying to be an electrician. They lived in Turkey for about 7 years, I think, before they finally were able to move to Canada. Now, finally, their lives are picking up. Zach has actually started going back to university to be an electrician. He just told me recently. So that's really good news. I'm really happy for them. So after 9 years of war, many realize they will never go back. It's a long road ahead. There are signs of change in Turkey. Syrians have been given some rights, but problems exist, which I'll touch on briefly. We have to first bear in mind that Turkey is considered a developing country with huge poverty levels, and the wealth inequality is one of the worst in the world. It's a challenging landscape, overburdened systems, and is very politically sensitive. It has a very politically sensitive environment. Turkey created pathways allowing Syrians work permits. However, due to legal barriers, for example, employers are forced into paying minimum wage and insurances. In reality, it's something like less than 1% is taken up. So many find themselves living in farm communities doing harvesting work, such as here, where they set up camp and live on the land. These are informal, exploitive environments where hours are long, pay is below minimum wage, and often people get cheated out of pay altogether. Workplace injuries are high, resulting in loss of income. And this really has an impact on people's well-being. And also, there's a lot of child labour. When otherwise children would be at school, many have to work as the family's main source of income, or to really help put food on the table. Healthcare, education, living conditions, and livelihoods are really key areas that we all focus on in what we do. And I really want to get on to the living conditions, as that's really what the Tribe Projects focuses on, but it's important just to touch on the others. because we do see healthcare and education improving, but it's really complex, and the changes aren't really that well implemented. So I'll just touch briefly on ID. ID is the number one thing people need. You know, in TIAFI, they spend a lot of time helping people register for their ID and helping people change their addresses and things like this to do with their ID. But often we find that there are real long delays for people to register, which really means that, you know, they don't have access to the services they need. And even with ID, healthcare rights are limited. And we see people who have their ID registered, for example, in a different region to Izmir, and therefore they can't access services in Izmir. And this is a case of a lady who had a tumour. And they basically said to her, go back to where you're registered. I do have to say, although, while there are many really sort of awful cases of the treatment people have had in the hospitals, we also have to bear in mind that these services are really overstretched. The people working in the hospitals, you know, they often they pass down information that might not be perhaps the right information. They're tired, they work too long. They've just had enough. People have had enough. Let's just pause, sorry. So there's just simply not enough services to help those who are most in need, and for example, people with disabilities. And you know, it changes, you know, constantly as well, what services are available and perhaps taken away as well. Also, education efforts have come up short. People can't afford it, books, clothing, etc. They need to work or look after siblings. There's language issues. There's no fixed address. There's bullying. They already feel marginalised. In Izmir, I would put a guess at there being less than 5% in the schools, particularly in the farm villages like here around Izmir, because of these reasons. Okay, finally, living conditions. So they are extremely hard. People find shelter where they can, in derelict buildings where there's no water, no toilets, etc. Like here, this particular place is made up of about 5 buildings like this. It's been occupied for about 5 years. It's fluctuated in numbers of residents due to authorities at times kicking the residents out, or problems with the landlord when people need electricity, people need water. So what do? But it's been a place where they haven't had to pay rent. They're sort of occupying it, but they're still paying money to some Turkish guy. It's been a really hostile sort of place to visit. And it's very hard to sort of have any positive impact there when they're constantly at risk of being kicked out. People make shelters with whatever they can find or afford. People make shelters with whatever they can find or afford. They find places that they can pay rent in animal yards like here. I've also seen a family living in, like an aerial tower, like, I don't know whether it's a mobile tower or some sort of tower anyway, and it has a storage room on the bottom. And I met a group of 2 families living in a room underneath the tower, and the woman who lives in a house, Turkish woman who lives in a house next door, was charging them rent to live in it illegally. It's incredible what people do or what they resort to. And housing is a huge problem. Let me paint a picture here at this point. We're looking at housing, or I'm talking about housing at the moment. The slides will be about Torbali. It's outside of Izmir, about 45 minutes away. It consists of a sort of metropolitan area and smaller villages around. And I spent a lot of time in the smaller villages around. That's where people are sort of living in housing like this on the screen. In the metropolitan area, there's more sort of new buildings. Torbali is pretty big. It's about 200,000 people. There's a lot of industry. huge factories, huge farming area. It services a lot of the country in terms of what it produces, and there's overall a lot of development, a lot going on. And so there's around 15,000 Syrians that live in the Torbali area, which is a significant amount out of, say, 200,000 people. And most are living in substandard conditions like this, where landlords are taking advantage of them, and they really don't care how people are living. And landlords also won't rent to Syrians, you know, in better quality, better standard housing. Often we see dangerous housing. This room caught on fire as water got into the roof and the electricals caught on fire. It's not even a legal house, and the landlord tried to get money off the Syrians to pay for it before kicking them out. And everyone met this family. The guys who did the summer course came over from Lesbos last year, met this family in their new location where we helped them move to. This is what kitchens look like. This is inside someone's house, and you can see, well, they have nothing. And over in the back corner is where they shower. This is another kitchen. This is typically how people make bread who are living in more of the informal tent settlements. They use open fire pit. It's very good bread. I can't make it. For those living in the tents and in the fields, like this location, there's a lack of sanitation generally, and generally no toilets, no clean water, drainage problems. And in this particular location, the group also visited here last year, and we actually called this camp, or doctors who I used to go around with called this camp diarrhea camp, because everybody in the camp, they were treating for diarrhea. Overall, it's an enormous, continual, day-to-day struggle. Let alone, you know, it's a huge struggle for people to live day to day. Let alone even try and return to their previous standards of living. But in all of this, I know that's all very doom and gloom. But in all of this, like, I want to reiterate another thing: that people are resilient, and they have this amazing energy and strength. And these are the guys who came last year, and we made dream catchers, and we couldn't get away at the end of the day. We spent hours there, and there's an amazing willingness to connect. And there's the benchmark hospitality that's well known in the culture, always welcoming you as family. So what do we do? Firstly, I want to say we've only ever been a small group of people, not a big group, not an organization. Really, actually, I just started it with 2 or 3 friends. But we focus primarily on living conditions and community development that creates positive social impact. From time to time, we have people that come and make amazing projects, education projects, etc. And empowerment is really core to our work. We know that the families we work with usually have solutions to their problems, and we work together to try and solve them. So how do we do this? I can't stress enough that it's about relationships and listening. We partner with local businesses. We really want to help the locals too, and help interaction. And we try to empower and not create dependence. We generally don't give handouts. We ask people to make contributions. And I think this has this is a really important sort of psychological impact. People have a sense of ownership and responsibility when they pay for something. We really don't want to create dependence, which I think is too common in this industry with giving out things. So I hate vague explanations, so I'll explain it some more. And really, it starts with compassion. Sometimes people just want you to visit and spend time with them. It lets them know you care. We do a lot of this. People have said it to us. They said, don't bring us wood, don't bring us flour, just come and spend time with us. We meet, talk, discuss what's going on. We build trust. We constantly consult, listening and brainstorming to understand people's needs. We're very grateful for the help we have had from local businesses. They tell us they are happy to add to the soup, the mix. They do good, they feel good, they tell their community about it. It all has a positive impact. And we find that the people that we work with have the skills to do the work, and they're really willing to do it. And often they actually don't want us to do it. They just haven't had the means to be able to solve or fix a lot of their problems. And in all of it, social time matters. We make time for fun and learning. And this is last year, again, making the dream catches. What have we done? I'll just talk about a few. In the beginning, we had been to about 20 locations around Torbali, and we sort of had to stop there because we were meeting so many people. I think we'd met about 3,000 people. We were listening. We said we weren't an organisation. We didn't promise anything, but we said we'd see what we could do. There were no expectations. We'd visit a couple of times. People were just happy to get to know us, and they were curious, and we were getting to know them. But it was coming into winter, and people needed blankets. Many people had arrived and they really didn't have anything. And other bigger NGOs, they give out one blanket per family, and typically there's, like, say, on average 7 people in a family. So along with some good friends from the worldwide tribe, we raised a ton of money, and we got every single person a blanket and mattresses. And that's really how it started. It really started, we raised the money through social media, and people they understood what we were trying to do. It was just authentic. People needed help. The people we shared it with knew that they could solve that, and we're really grateful that we were able to do that. This is a typical tent that the people live in who live in the fields. They come in different sizes, but they're typically 6 by 3.5 meters. And they're like a jigsaw to put together. There's no flooring, there's no ventilation, humidity is a problem. There's a canvas lining, and on top there's plastic. They cost less than 100 euros, would you believe? I don't know if you've seen, or aware of other tents that are being manufactured by groups that are taking the opportunity to, I suppose, cash in on this. But I think these tents could be better designed. They're such a little cost. They could even double, and they'd still be double in cost, and they'd still be so cheap in Turkey. And I'll just also say that people often choose to live in tents because it gives them flexibility and freedom to move where the work is. And it's cheap. It's cheaper than living in a house, and it allows them to, save money. And typically people are trying to send money home. If they've got any extra cash, they're sending it home to family who are back in Syria, or they have no other option because there's no other housing. Just waiting for it to move on. So in this location, it was the one that you saw just before, which the group came to last year. It didn't look like this. There were huge drainage issues. It was toxic. People were always sick, as I said. And we asked our local Turkish friend, who's a local builder, to come and take a look. These guys, they know the ground, they know the environment, and what should be done, what's the norm. And we got to work, and we dug holes big enough to drain about 12 cubic meters of water, and the residents actually did most of the work. And then we got a few of these big bad boys, and the result, after everyone got to work, was more like this, and it really opened up a lot of space for the residents, and they have they have this beautiful, clean, communal area that's used for weddings and all different types of things. Another issue is sanitation, which I talked about, and toilets look like this, and this, if you can even make out that that's a toilet. So on the right is a long-term volunteer builder, David, who people met last year, who was out in Turkey at the time. And David designed these simple toilet frames, we bring the materials, and then we go on site to build with the residents who have already prepared the site typically. Like, for example, they did a big deep pit toilet. And these guys put a lot of effort into preparing the area. I love this picture. It was one of the last days we had before lockdown, one of the last visits we had. This is what it looks like completed, and the residents figure out how to cover the pit, basically. There's many good ideas that have been implemented around the world to deal with sanitation, I know, and this is by no means great, but it's functional, and it was desperately needed, and still is. It's important to meet people, I think, where they are at as well. I don't necessarily think other styles would work. It's just not what people know or what they are ready to know. I don't know, I just think that's an important point. This is the inside of a tent where we provided pallets to put down as flooring. It was simple and practical, but pallets are no longer cheap. We need a better solution. It's really cold and damp for people. Firewood, it's really one of the things that we've stuck to doing for the last 3 or 4 years. Each year I sort of think we probably won't need to help people with firewood, that perhaps people's situations might be improving, but each year there's something else that becomes a challenge for people. With the economy tanking, exchange rates now, COVID, etc. So we've taken truckload after truckload of wood, and it's helped around, I'd say, 300 or 400 families each year to keep warm. In the beginning we were seeing people burning plastic. They still burn plastic to get the fire going. But generally, people tell us that it's the thing that's the most important thing for them over the winter. So we're going to continue doing that. But it's inefficient. The wood burns fast. It's not good for the environment. And to burn the wood, they use these stoves, which we've provided a lot. And you can probably see they look pretty cheap and they're not very efficient. I don't know if we can come up with a better solution. Most recently, well, before COVID, we were building kitchen dressers. You saw some of the kitchens I showed earlier, what they were like. And it's really been a great experience. That's the other thing. We spend, it actually doesn't take us that long to build a kitchen dresser. We timed ourselves, and I think it took about half an hour to build one. But the idea isn't to sort of productionize these and make them as quick as possible. The idea is we're spending time with people. We find out a lot about what's going on for people, and we spend a day building things like this. And here, I love this picture. The women got involved, and they loved it, and we did too. This woman here who's doing the work, she said to me, "I'd never be able to do this in 100 years." And I said, "Yeah, you've just got to have a try." And I said that I could never do it before. I'm not a builder. I didn't have these skills, and people, everyone's shy at first at having a go, I think, and they were really awesome. I think these women, they took instruction better than the men. So we've had a great time building the kitchen dresses, and I haven't put a picture in here, but of what they actually look like. But you know, people embellish them with their own sort of lace and jewels and things like this. And I put these in just to show also that it's been interesting seeing the different ways. We're also learning, for example, how to make concrete, which is sort of very different to what we used to. And sort of finally getting to the end of the discussion, it's at the start of the year, we built 2 full extensions of the side of existing housing, and they're pretty basic: foundations, walls, roofing, rendering, electricals, etc. But the Syrian guys living here are really experienced builders, and they've worked in places like before the war, like Qatar and Lebanon. And there's a real need for more of these extensions. I'll just explain. It took less than 1 week to build, and the materials cost less than 500 euros. The guys built it, the Syrian guys built it. We sort of, really, they didn't need our help with anything. So it didn't cost us anything for labor. And what it gives is it provides another house for a family. This has been a really big step forward for us. And we are only able to achieve this, I think, from the deep relationships that we've made in the community and with the local businesses who really try and help us and help the people in the community. Frozen, sorry. So what's next? As I said, there's a real need for more of these rooms or more houses in general. We don't want to see people continue to struggle in makeshift houses like this. This is a family who, it's a single room, and we see these all around in the villages, and people have asked us to try and help. We've got a long list of people who would like better housing. And I suppose with a little help and ideas from people like you guys, we really have an opportunity to improve the way people live. We can create more housing, we can improve the housing, we can have better designed tents, toilets. Yeah. So I suppose lastly, I just want to also thank the university and the guys organising this. Really a big thank you. Because it enables us to all work together and to really do great things.